Hello everyone and welcome to this new video of Deep in Politics. So today we will be studying together the 2020 presidential election result of the state of Ohio. Before getting into details and before studying the numbers of the state, let's talk a little bit about the voting history of the state. So since the beginning of the 21st century, the state of Ohio has been a very big battleground state and has been flipping from Democrat to Republican and vice versa. As you see here, in the 2000 and 2004 election, the Republicans were able to win the state by a very small margin. In 2000, they were able to win it, as you see here, by a little bit more than 3%, whereas in 2004, they won it by an even smaller margin by around 2%. In 2008 and 2012, the Democrats were able to take back the state as President Obama was able to win it by 4% and 3% respectively in 2008 and 2012. However, in the last two elections, President Trump was able to win the state by a quite comfortable margin. As you see here, he was able to win the 2016 and the 2020 presidential election in the state of Ohio by around 8 points. And here you can see the details of the 2016 and 2020 presidential election result in the state of Ohio. As in 2016, President Trump was able to win the state by 8.1%, and in 2020, he was able to win the state by approximately the same margin by 8%, 53.3% to 45.3%. So it seems that from now on, the Ohio is not really a battleground state anymore and is going more and more toward the Republican. And once again, the polling industry failed big in predicting the winner of the 2020 presidential election in the state of Ohio. As you see here, the average polling industry, the eve of the election, was predicting a Trump win by only 0.8%. So it was a toss-up state. We didn't really know, according to the polls, who was gonna win the state the day of the election. And as you have already seen, President Trump ended up winning the state by a margin of 8 points, which is 10 times more than what the polling industry predicted. So also, before going into details, it's important to say that the state of Ohio is one of the few states where President Trump and the Republican were able to do as good as 2016. I mean, maybe the only state where the Republican were able to do as good and even improve a little bit compared to the 2016 election was the state of Florida, and the state of Florida and the state of Ohio. In all the other battleground states, we will see, and we have already seen, that the Republican regressed compared to 2016. So why were the Republican able to keep the state of Ohio with such a big lead, and why the Democrats weren't able to close this gap compared to the 2016 election? Well, as we will see, the main reason are the white non-educated voters, the rural voters of the state of Ohio, who turned up in very big numbers in favor of President Trump and the Republican. And despite the fact that the Democrats were able to improve their score in some of the big counties of Ohio, especially in the counties where we have a big portion of white educated voters, white voters with a bachelor degree, this wasn't enough to close the gap with the Republican and to counterbalance the surge of Republican in rural area among white non-educated voters. So as we've done with previous states, we will proceed in analyzing the state of Ohio by dividing the counties of the state in two groups, the small counties and the medium and large counties. So like everywhere else, the Republican did very, very well in the small counties and were able to improve in 61 out of 66 small counties. And this is expected, even though they did here even better than expected. But however, as we've already said, it was expected that the Republican will do better in small counties, because these counties are rural counties where there is a small percentage of bachelor degree among its population, and so these voters tend to be more conservative and so they will vote more for the Republican, which is the conservative party of the US. And as we will see in studying the result of some of these counties, the white non-educated voters, the rural white voters turned up in big numbers to in favor of President Trump, even in bigger numbers than 2016. And in order for you to understand this, we will compare the result of some small counties between the 2016 and the 2020 election. But before doing this, let's just take a quick look on the general result of the state of Ohio. So here I've drawn tables in order to make it easier for you to see the difference between the two elections. So here we are. In 2016, the Republicans were able to win the state by a margin of 8.1%, 51.3% to 43.2%, whereas they were able to win the 2020 election in the state by almost the same margin, 53.3% to 45.3%. As you see here also, both parties were able to increase their voter base compared to the 2016 election. The Republicans were able to gain 11% more vote compared to 2016, whereas the Democrats were able to gain 12% more vote than the previous election. And as you see here, the increase in the number of voters of both parties are not very big compared to the overall increase in the U.S. As the Democrats were able countrywide to augment their number of voters by around 30%, which is huge. However, in Ohio they were only able to get 12% more vote, whereas the Republicans were able to increase the number of their vote countrywide by around 17%, whereas here they were able to increase their vote by only 11%. So unlike the rest of the US, the increase in the number of voters in the state of Ohio was lower than the rest of the US. That being said, and before moving to the study of some counties, just let us see some data about the state of Ohio. So as you see here, Ohio is a state where there is around 11.7 million US citizens living in the state, so it's a normal state, a medium-sized state, and for this it's allocated 18 electoral votes, which is an important number of votes that can be very determinant in electing the US president. As you see here, the state has a big majority of white population and white voters. The second ethnic group is the black voters, but they are way behind the white voters. They only represent 12% of the population in the state. And as you see, what also matter for us here is the percentage of bachelor degree among the adult people of the state of Ohio. So it's around 29%, 29.3% to be precise, and it's a little bit less than the average in the US. So that being said, since this state has a big majority of white voters and a kind of small percentage of adult people with a bachelor degree, you would expect the Republican to do better, and this is what happened. And as I said previously, we will now begin to study the result in some counties of Ohio in order for you to see what really happened in the state. So first you will begin by studying the result in the small counties of Ohio, and as I said previously, the Republicans were able to improve big in these type of county, as they were able to improve in 61 out of 66 small counties. And in order for you to see that, I've chosen 3 or 4 small counties, and I've compared their result in both the 2016 and the 2020 election, and I've drew the result in tables. So the first county that I want you to study, or that I want us to study together, is the county of Pike. So in Pike County, let's see some data about Pike County before talking about the result. So Pike County is a small county in Ohio where there is that has a population of 28,000 Americans, and the big majority of the population here is white. You see the white voters represent around 95% of the total population, and you will see here that it has a very weak or a very small percentage of bachelor degree among its population, only 12.6%, so it's half the rate of Ohio and less than two-fifths the percentage of bachelor degree of the US. And so most of the voters in this county are white rural voters, white non-educated voters who are very conservative, as you said, and who turned up an even bigger number in favor of President Trump than they did in the 2016 election. And here you can see that compared to the 2016 election, the Republicans were able to gain 7.7% in general vote, as their result went up from 66.1% to 73.8%, whereas the Democrats did really bad in this county, as they lost 4.5% compared to 2016, and the result went down from 29.6% to 25.1%. But most importantly, just for you to see how bad the Democrats did in Pike County and in general in all the small counties in Ohio, you can see that they've lost 10% of their voters in comparison to 2016, as they lost around 400 votes compared to the last election. As you see, in the last election, they got around 3,500 votes, whereas in the 2020 election, they got a little bit more than 3,100 votes. So this is a loss of around 12% of their voter base. And if you see that the 2020 election was a high turnout election compared to the 2016, you can see how bad the Democrats did here, as they lost in the general college result of the county of Pike. And countywide, this allowed the Republican to extend their lead over the Democrat by 12.2%. And of course, this big shift in favor of Republican can only be explained by the huge rural white voters turnout in their favor. As we've seen, the county of Pike has a big majority of white voters. Most of them don't have a bachelor degree. A similar result can be seen in the state of Carroll. So once again, before studying the result of this state, let's see a little bit of data concerning the state of Carroll. So Carroll is a state that has almost the same characteristic of the state of Pike. It has a population of 27,000, and the majority, even we can say all the voters in this county are white voters. They represent 98% of the general population of this county. Once again, you will see that most of these white voters don't have a bachelor degree, so they are very rural voters, very conservative voters. And as you see here, only 13.3% of the adult people of the county of Carroll have a bachelor degree. And so once again, you would expect the Republican to do better than 2016, and this is the case. The Republican were able to, in 2016, the Republican were able to win this county 70.4% to 24%, whereas in the 2020 election result, they were able to improve their score and to win the county by 75.6% to only 23%. So they were able to gain 5.2% compared to 2016, whereas the Democrat lost 1.1% compared to the previous election, and this allowed the Republican to extend their lead by 6.3% compared to 2016. And once again, the main reason of this shift toward the Republican is their surge among white non-educated voters. The same thing also happened in the county of Vinton County. Let's see a little bit of information concerning Vinton County. So Vinton County is even a smaller county than Pike and Carroll, and also most of its population, if not all its population, is formed from white voters. And once again, you will see that most of these white voters don't have a bachelor degree, as only 12.8% the population of this county have a bachelor degree. Once again, these are rural voters. These are voters that didn't went to college, that didn't get in touch with liberal idea, and so they are very conservative and they vote for Republican, which is the conservative party of the United States of America. And this is and you can see this here. So the Republican were able to improve and to gain 6.8% in the general result compared to 2016, as their percentage and their share of vote went up from 70.1% to around 77%, whereas the Democrat lost 2.3%, going down from 24.4% to 22.1%. And once again, we see how bad the Democrat did in these small counties and among the white rural voters, as they lost 1.4% in their electoral base compared to 2016. They lost here around 40 votes compared to the last election, which is very important, which is a very big loss since this election was a high turnout election. So it's clear that the Republicans have a stronghold base, which is represented by the white rural voters, and the Democrats are not being able to improve among this category of voters. Is it because this category of voters like Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump was able to motivate them way more than any other Republican candidate, or is it that it's impossible for the Democrat to regain a part of these white rural voters, as they diverge a lot from their political view? This is something to keep an eye on, and we will only be able to answer this question in the upcoming elections. Last but not least, we will see the county of Perry. The Perry County, it's also a small county in the state of Ohio, where the Republicans were able to improve big. Let's see some information about the state. So it's a bigger state than the previous. It's a bigger county, than the previous one. It has a population of around 36,000 American. Once again, like the other county, we see the same thing. Most of the voters of this county are white voters. They represent 97% of the total voters, and once again you see that most of these white voters don't have a bachelor degree. There is only the average percentage of people having a bachelor degree in this county is 12.2%, and so once again you will see that rural voters have voted for the Republican in very big numbers, even in bigger numbers than 2016. You see here the Republicans were able to gain 6.4% compared to 2016, as the result went up from 67.7% to 74.1%, whereas the Democrats lost 2.8% and went down from 27.4% to 24.6%, which enabled the Republican to extend their lead by 9.2% in the state. And of course, 9.2%, it's a very big margin in an interval of only one election. So from what we've seen, it's clear that the category of rural voters, white rural voters, white non-educated voters, were the main reason behind President Trump and the Republicans not only winning the state of Ohio, but also doing good in this 2020 election, despite all the prediction that predicted them to fail big. And it's really important to see that in 2020, the Republican, and especially President Trump, were able to do even better than 2016 among this category of voter, despite the fact that they got really good result in the 2016 among the category of rural voters. And so, as I said previously, and as I will say it again and again, the main reason for the Republican, or the stronghold of Republican in this election and any upcoming election, is this category of white educated voters, white non-educated voters. The Republican cannot negligate this category of voters anymore. They will not be able to win any election, not only in the state of Ohio, but in all the country, without motivating this base of voters and without obliging them or motivating them to go and to vote the day of the election. I can guarantee you that the category of rural voters, white rural voters, will not shift to Democrat in big numbers. It's impossible for the Democrat to gain back some of this category of voters. But the problem for Republican is that before President Trump, this category of rural voters, white rural voters, was not always motivated to go and vote. And when they did not do so, the Republican ended up losing. And President Trump was able to come back and to motivate this base of voters. And the Republican will have to find a way in order for them to keep them motivated if they want to win any previous elections, especially that they are regressing among the category of white educated voters. So now that being said, what we saw in these 4 small counties also happened in most of the small county in Ohio, and it happened more precisely in 61 out of 66 small county in Ohio. And just for your information, I define a small county as a county that has less than 70,000 voters or a population of less than 70,000. So that being said, let's move and talk a little bit now about medium-sized and large county. So here you would expect the Democrat to do better than the Republican, because in such county generally the percentage of bachelor degree and of educated people is larger than small counties. And as we said previously, people with a bachelor degree tend to go more to college. They tend to go to college, and so they are more in contact with liberal idea and with other ethnic groups, and so they tend to have a more liberal political view, and so they tend to vote for Democrat more than Republican. And this is also what happened in the medium sized and small and the medium and big counties of Ohio, as the Democrats were able to improve in 14 out of 22 such counties. As you see, even in this category of counties, the improvement of Democrat was not as big as in other counties, as they were able to improve in only a little bit more than half of these type of county, which is not compared to the result in previous states. But however, they did better than Republican in these states compared to the result of 2016. And also I have chosen some example of this type of counties in order to let you explain what really happened here and why the Democrats were able to improve. So the first county that I chose is Hamilton County. Let's see some information about this county. So as you see here, first of all, you see that it's a little bit more diverse ethnically than the small counties. You have here 65% of the voters that are white voters and 26% that are black population or black voters. You will also see that it has a big percentage of bachelor degree. It's around 40.3%. It's 1.4 times higher than the rate of Ohio, and it's even higher than the rate of the United States by about 25%. So you would expect here the Democrat to do better as there is more educated people here and more white educated voters, to be more precise. And as we said, in this election, not only in Ohio but everywhere else in the US, the Democrats were able to surge among the white educated voters, and this surge was the main reason for them winning the election. They surged very importantly among this category of voters, and they were even able to close or to counterbalance their loss among minority voters. So let's see what happened in the county of Hamilton. So Hamilton County is one of the biggest county of Ohio, and here the Republican lost 1.1% compared to 2016. They got only 41.3%, whereas in 2016 they got 42.4%, whereas the Democrats were able to gain 4.5% in the general votes, as the result went up from 52.7% to 57.2%, which enabled them to extend their lead by 5.6%. And 5.6% is quite a big number when you are talking about a county that has more or around 500,000 votes. So extending your lead by 5.6% in a county that has 500,000 of votes is way more important and have a way bigger impact than improving by 10% in a county that has only 15,000 or even 30,000 votes. So now, if you take into consideration that more than 2/3 of the voters in this county are white voters, and that this county has a very big percentage of bachelor degree of around 40%, then you can easily say that the main reason for Democrats surging in this county and doing way better than 2016 is the improvement in among the category of white educated voters, because we already know that, or we already knew that black voters will vote for Republican in big numbers. So white voter cannot be the main reason behind the surge of Democrat in this county. And so the only possible explanation is the surge of Democrat among white educated voters. The same thing happened, but even in a bigger effect in the county of Delaware. So this is the county of Delaware. It's a smaller county than Hamilton County. Hamilton County has a population of 800,000, whereas Delaware have a population of 200,000, a little bit more than this. But what's interesting in Delaware is that it has a big majority of white voters, a big majority of white population. White people here represent around 90% of the total population. And most importantly, this is a county where you have where people are really educated, where a big number of people have a bachelor degree. As you see here, more than half of the adult people in Ohio and the county of Delaware have a bachelor degree. And so, if there is a big shift here in favor of Democrat compared to 2016, the only possible explanation would be that educated people, or white educated people, voted for them in bigger number than they did in 2016. And this is in fact what happened. Look, here we have a big shift in favor of Democrat. You see that the Republicans were able to win this county in 2016 by around 16 points, 54.5% to 38.7%. However, in 2020, the result was quite different, as the Republican lost around 2% in the general result, as their percentage of or as their share of votes went down from 54.5% to 52.7%, whereas the Democrat gained 7.1%, which is a big gain in a country that has around 250,000 of voters and 250,000 of population. And the result went up from 38.7% to around 46%. And this represents a shift of 9% in favor of the Democrat in comparison to 2016. And what I want you to see here is that the Republicans were able to surge, not because the Democrats were able to surge, not because the Republicans did bad. Indeed, the Republicans were able to gain around 10,000 more votes compared to 2016. They were able to get, indeed, the result went up from around 57,000 to around 67,000, and this is good. So they didn't lose a big number of voters. They didn't lose any voters. They gained 10,000 voters. But the big surprise was the surge of Democrat, was the increase in the number of votes that the Democrat got compared to 2016, as they went up from 40,000 to around 60,000. It's an increase of 41.2% in the number of votes that they got in comparison to 2016, which is very big. And this increase cannot be explained only by their surge among the white educated voter of the county of Delaware that were present in 2016. I think that the only possible explanation is that the county of Delaware is subject to an immigration. People are coming from outside this county to live here. Most of these people are coming from other counties in Ohio, but you also have other white educated people coming from different states. And it seems that this immigration favored the Democrat, as they were able to gain around 40% more votes than 2016. But we will see this in many other states. You will see that, for example, in the state of Georgia, the immigration toward the state was the main reason for the Democrat winning the state. However, in the state of Ohio, this immigration is limited to a very small number of counties. One of them is Delaware. But what I wanted you to see and to realize is that immigration can play a vital role in changing the result of a county and even of a state. So what we saw in the counties of Delaware and in the county of Hamilton, we can also see it in most of the medium-sized and big counties of the state of Ohio, but I have only chosen these two because they represent the best what happened in the big state of Ohio. So that being said, let's now give a conclusion or a general overview of the result in Ohio and of the 2020 presidential election result in the state of Ohio to see where this state is heading in the future. So first of all, I don't think that we can call this state a battleground state anymore, as we've seen, the Republicans were able to win the state in the last two elections by more or by 8%. And I don't think that a state where a party is winning it twice in a row by such a big margin can be called a battleground state. So provided that nothing very important happened and nothing out of normal will take place, I do think that the Republicans will be able to keep the state with them for many elections from now. And the reason for this is, of course, as I said, their solid base of rural voters that will never shift that will never shift toward the Republican. And secondly, I do think that even the Republican will be able to gain back some of the white educated voters. And so in any upcoming election, I do expect the Republican to win the state of Ohio by more than 10%, because as I've said, all the circumstances before the election played in favor of the Democrat, and so what the Democrat or the result that the Democrats were able to get in this election, not only in the state of Ohio but countrywide, was the best case scenario for them. As I said, everything that happened before the election, from the coronavirus, from the Black Lives Matter movement, from everything that took place, played in their favor and against President Trump. President Trump really had a very difficult year before the 2020 election, and this impacted him. And so you have a big number of educated voters, of white educated voters, that voted for the Democrat, not because they liked the Democrat or not because they liked President Biden, but because they didn't want President Trump to continue for a second term. And the reason is that, in general, educated voters that go to college don't really like the far-right politics, and it's clear that President Trump was a little bit more to the right than usual. And so a certain number of the white educated voters will vote for Republican in the next election. All will not vote for any of both parties, and in both cases the Democrat will lose some votes and the Republican will be able to increase their lead in the state of Ohio. So that being said, just let me give a last remark. When I say, I already said it and I will say it again, when I say non-educated voters or rural voters, I'm just meaning voters that don't have a bachelor degree. I'm not saying that these voters don't understand politics, or that other voters that have a bachelor degree have a better opinion or a correct opinion, whereas they do have a wrong opinion. No, it has nothing to do with that. The only thing that I mean when I'm using the term non-educated voters is voters without a bachelor degree. So that being said, thank you for listening to this video, and I will see you soon in a study of another battleground state of the 2020 election. Thank you.